Anita Sharma and her family car driver, Rakesh, shared a secret that would shatter lives, but no one could have imagined it would end with a body hidden inside a freezer. The city woke up to a disturbing discovery that shattered the calm of an otherwise ordinary morning. In the parking area of a quiet apartment complex, a large deep freezer stood abandoned near the boundary wall, its surface scratched and slightly rusted. At first, residents assumed it had been thrown away during a house move, but a strong, unnatural smell began to spread through the air. Security staff grew uneasy and alerted the building management, who quickly realized this was not a simple case of discarded waste. When authorities arrived and forced the freezer open, they found a body tightly wrapped in layers of plastic and tape, frozen stiff inside the cramped space. The news spread rapidly, turning the peaceful residential area into a scene of fear and confusion. Police sealed the parking lot as curious neighbors gathered at a distance, whispering and speculating. No one could understand how such a horrifying object had appeared overnight without anyone noticing. The building housed families, elderly couples, and working professionals, all living routine lives that now felt suddenly unsafe. Investigators noted that the freezer was relatively new and had been transported recently, suggesting planning rather than impulse. Early inspection revealed no identification on the body, making the mystery even deeper. CCTV cameras showed partial footage of the freezer being moved late at night, but the faces were unclear. The police began questioning residents floor by floor, slowly realizing that the freezer likely came from within the same building. What appeared to be a shocking external crime was beginning to look like something far more unsettling. A carefully hidden act committed close to home, behind familiar doors, by someone trusted and unnoticed. The investigation quickly shifted from the shocking discovery outside to the lives unfolding quietly inside the apartment building. Police attention focused on a specific flat where the freezer was last seen being moved from. The family living there appeared respectable and ordinary, fitting perfectly into the middle-class rhythm of the city. The husband was a small businessman known for frequent travel, often leaving early and returning late. His absence was common knowledge among neighbors, who believed the family lived a disciplined and private life. The wife was seen regularly, managing household chores and caring for the child, rarely socializing beyond polite greetings. Nothing in her behavior suggested chaos or danger. As officers studied the household routine, subtle details began to stand out. Delivery records showed frequent visits by service workers, and security logs noted repeated entries by the family's car driver even on days when the husband was away. The flat itself was neat, almost too clean, giving investigators the impression of recent deep cleaning. Inside the kitchen, a noticeable empty space hinted that a large appliance had been removed. Receipts collected from nearby stores confirmed the recent purchase of a deep freezer, raising immediate suspicion. Neighbors recalled hearing faint noises at odd hours, but had dismissed them as everyday household activity. The sense of safety they once felt now dissolved into unease. What seemed like a normal home slowly revealed signs of stress, secrecy, and hidden movement. Investigators realized the crime was not sudden, but rooted in the private routines of the family. Behind closed doors, daily habits had masked growing tension, setting the foundation for a tragedy that no one in the building saw coming until it was far too late.
As the investigation moved deeper, attention turned to the family's car driver, a man who had blended easily into their daily life. Records showed he had been employed for over 2 years and was trusted with more than just driving duties. He often ran errands, picked up groceries, and delivered documents to the flat. Because of the husband's frequent travel, the driver's presence at the apartment became routine and unquestioned. Security guards remembered seeing him enter the building even when the car remained parked outside, a detail that previously seemed harmless. Gradually, investigators uncovered a pattern that revealed more than professional responsibility. Phone data showed repeated calls between the wife and the driver at unusual hours. These calls increased whenever the husband was out of town. The frequency suggested emotional dependence rather than necessity. Financial records also revealed small but regular cash withdrawals made by the wife, often matching dates when the driver visited the flat without official work. These details pointed toward a relationship carefully hidden under the cover of routine service. Neighbors later recalled subtle changes. The wife appeared more anxious in recent months, often watching the entrance before stepping outside. The driver, once quiet and respectful, began acting more confident, lingering longer than required. Inside the flat, investigators found signs of secrecy, including a secondary phone hidden inside a drawer. Photos and messages recovered from the device confirmed the existence of an affair that had grown intense and risky. What made the situation more dangerous was the imbalance of fear and control. The relationship had crossed a point where it could no longer remain hidden without consequences. The investigation revealed that what began as a private betrayal had slowly turned into a threat capable of destroying lives. This secret bond, built in silence and routine, would soon become the key force driven. As the secret relationship continued, it became increasingly reckless and difficult to control. The careful balance the wife had tried to maintain began to collapse under pressure. Phone records showed a sudden rise in communication, not just late at night but throughout the day. Meetings became more frequent, and small mistakes started appearing. The driver began expecting more than secrecy, and his growing confidence turned into impatience. What once felt exciting now felt dangerous, but backing out no longer seemed possible. At the same time, the husband's life was shifting in unexpected ways. His business suffered losses, forcing him to cancel several trips and spend more time at home. This sudden change disrupted the routine the affair depended on. The wife struggled to adjust, constantly fearing exposure. Her behavior grew tense and unpredictable, and the emotional distance between husband and wife widened. Small disagreements over daily matters masked deeper unrest building beneath the surface. Financial strain added another layer of pressure. Bank statements showed unexplained spending that no longer went unnoticed. The driver, aware of the risk, began asking for money more often, hinting that secrets could surface if his demands were ignored. The affair was no longer hidden passion but a source of fear. Every phone vibration felt threatening, and every knock at the door triggered panic. Investigators later concluded that this phase was critical. The crime did not emerge from sudden rage but from prolonged stress, fear of exposure, and loss of control. The wife felt trapped between social shame, family collapse, and growing pressure from the driver. The situation reached a point where silence seemed impossible and consequences unavoidable. What followed was not a moment of madness but a calculated decision formed during weeks of anxiety. This chapter marked the shift from secrecy to survival, setting the stage for a choice that would permanently alter Eve.
Suspicion finally entered the house quietly, without arguments or open accusations. The husband began noticing small changes that no one else would have connected. The wife guarded her phone more carefully, stepped outside to take calls, and seemed distracted even during ordinary moments. Her routine no longer followed the pattern he had known for years. Though he said nothing, doubt settled deeply in his mind. Instead of confronting her, he chose observation. He reduced travel, returned home unexpectedly, and watched closely. The atmosphere inside the flat grew heavy, filled with unspoken tension. To protect himself, the husband installed a small security camera in the living area under the excuse of safety and theft prevention. The device blended into the corner of the room, easily ignored. Days passed with nothing unusual, but eventually the footage revealed movements that raised serious concern. The camera captured repeated visits that did not match normal household needs. Timing, body language, and patterns confirmed what the husband had feared but refused to believe. The truth was discovered silently, without a single word exchanged. Rather than reacting immediately, the husband began collecting information. He reviewed bank statements, checked travel dates, and compared them with activity inside the house. Each detail strengthened his understanding of the betrayal. The discovery crushed him emotionally, but he chose restraint over confrontation. He feared public shame, family collapse, and the future of the child. His silence, however, created a dangerous vacuum. Unaware of how much had been uncovered, the wife continued living under the illusion that her secret remained hidden. What she did not realize was that the balance of power had shifted. The house, once a place of routine and comfort, had become a silent battlefield. This phase marked the point where truth existed but remained buried, allowing fear, desperation, and poor judgment to grow unchecked.
Instead of ending the affair or confessing, the wife made a choice that pushed the situation into darker territory. Fear controlled her thoughts more than guilt. She believed exposure would destroy her social standing, take away her child, and turn her into a public disgrace. The pressure became unbearable when the driver sensed her vulnerability. His demands increased, and his behavior changed from cautious to threatening. He reminded her that he knew too much and hinted that silence had a price. What once felt like shared secrecy now felt like blackmail. Evidence later showed that the wife began planning rather than reacting. She searched online for cleaning methods, disposal techniques, and ways to avoid suspicion. Purchases were made in cash to avoid records. A deep freezer was bought from a local store far from her neighborhood, delivered discreetly, and installed quickly. To outsiders, it appeared like a normal household upgrade. Inside her mind, it represented control over a situation she believed was slipping away. The husband noticed the freezer but did not question it openly. His silence was interpreted as ignorance, which strengthened the wife's false confidence. Meanwhile, the driver became careless, visiting at unsafe hours and ignoring risks. His sense of power grew, while her fear deepened. The imbalance between them became dangerous. Investigators later concluded that this period was when intention solidified. The wife convinced herself that there was only one way to protect everything she feared losing. Rational thinking disappeared, replaced by survival instincts shaped by panic and pride. The crime that followed was not spontaneous. It was the result of days of preparation, emotional isolation, and the belief that one irreversible act could permanently erase a problem. This moment marked the point where return was no longer possible, and the path ahead led only toward destruction.
The crime took place on an afternoon when the building was unusually quiet. Heavy rain kept most residents indoors, and the sound of traffic masked movements inside the flat. Investigators later reconstructed the sequence through forensic evidence rather than witness accounts. The driver had arrived believing the situation was under control, unaware that careful planning had already replaced fear in the wife's mind. What happened inside the apartment was swift and deliberate, driven by desperation rather than emotion. After the act, the wife focused entirely on erasing traces. Floors were scrubbed, surfaces wiped repeatedly, and waste disposed of in different locations across the city. She worked with precision, aware that even a small mistake could expose everything. The body was wrapped tightly in multiple layers of plastic to prevent leakage or odor. Every step showed preparation and a disturbing level of calm that investigators later described as calculated. The deep freezer became the central part of the plan. The body was placed inside, arranged to fit the confined space, and sealed carefully. Power was turned on immediately to slow decomposition. For several days, life inside the flat continued as if nothing had changed. The wife maintained her routine, taking care of household tasks and appearing normal to neighbors. No visible signs of panic were noticed, which helped her avoid suspicion. However, the freezer quickly turned from solution to burden. Constant monitoring was required, and fear of discovery never faded. Every sound from the appliance felt threatening. The presence of the freezer inside the home created a psychological weight that grew heavier each day. What was meant to hide the truth instead trapped her in constant anxiety. The crime may have been completed, but its consequences had only begun to unfold, quietly closing in on her with every passing hour. The pressure became unbearable when practical problems started appearing. Power cuts in the area grew frequent, and each outage increased the risk of discovery. Despite careful sealing, a faint odor began escaping whenever the freezer ran for long hours. The wife tried masking it with air fresheners and cleaning chemicals, but the smell returned persistently. Her sleep suffered, and her behavior became erratic. Neighbors noticed she avoided conversation and rushed in and out of the flat, always appearing tense and distracted. Realizing the freezer could no longer remain inside the apartment, she planned its removal. Late one night, when most residents were asleep, the freezer was disconnected and wrapped in cloth to hide its appearance. Using the building's service lift, it was moved down to the parking area. She positioned it near discarded furniture, hoping it would blend in as unwanted junk. In her mind, distance meant safety. Once it was outside the flat, she believed suspicion would drift away with it. But the move created new risks. A security guard noticed the freezer had not been there before. Over the next day, liquid began leaking from the bottom, forming dark patches on the concrete floor. The smell intensified, spreading across the parking area. Complaints reached the building management, who assumed an electrical fault or spoiled food. When attempts to identify the owner failed, authorities were informed as a precaution. The arrival of police marked the beginning of the end. What the wife thought was a clever disposal became the strongest evidence against her. The freezer, once meant to conceal the crime, now stood in public view, attracting attention rather than hiding secrets. Investigators immediately suspected it came from within the building, narrowing their focus to a small group of residents. The mistake was simple but fatal. By trying to remove the problem, she had exposed it, setting in motion an investigation that would soon unravel every sea.
9. Once the freezer was opened, the investigation moved rapidly and methodically. Police sealed the apartment complex and began collecting evidence from every possible angle. Serial numbers on the freezer led to the store where it was purchased, and transaction records narrowed the buyer to a small list of customers. CCTV footage from nearby streets showed the freezer being transported late at night, confirming it had been moved deliberately rather than dumped randomly. Attention returned to the family's flat. Forensic teams searched the apartment thoroughly, using chemical tests to detect traces invisible to the eye. Despite extensive cleaning, small signs remained. Marks on the floor, fibers, and residue near the kitchen area told a clear story. Investigators also reviewed building security logs, identifying repeated late visits by the same individual. The driver's name surfaced quickly, linking him to the household beyond professional duty. Phone records became the strongest evidence. Calls, deleted messages, and location data revealed a hidden relationship stretching back months. The pattern aligned perfectly with the husband's travel schedule. Financial analysis showed cash withdrawals and purchases that supported the timeline of planning and concealment. Each piece of evidence connected seamlessly, leaving little room for doubt. When questioned, the wife's statements failed to match the digital and physical evidence. Contradictions appeared in simple details, and her explanations shifted repeatedly. Investigators noted signs of exhaustion and fear, but facts outweighed emotion. The driver was officially identified as the victim, and the motive became clear through documented threats and financial pressure. By this stage, the case was no longer a mystery but a reconstruction of deliberate actions. The affair, the fear of exposure, and the calculated attempt to erase consequences stood fully exposed. What had begun as secrecy inside a private home was now the final stage of the case unfolded with a clarity that left no space for doubt. The accumulated evidence formed a complete narrative, from the hidden affair to the careful planning and ultimate disposal attempt. The wife was taken into custody after investigators confirmed the timeline and motive. Her calm exterior collapsed under the weight of documented proof. The freezer, phone records, financial trails, and forensic findings together painted a picture of a crime driven by fear and desperation rather than impulse. The husband's role emerged as one of silent awareness rather than involvement. Investigators confirmed he had known about the affair but had never imagined it would escalate into violence. His restraint and hesitation, intended to protect family dignity, instead allowed the situation to grow unchecked. This detail shocked the public, adding another layer of tragedy to the case. As the story reached the media, it spread rapidly across the country. Headlines focused on betrayal, secrecy, and the chilling method used to hide the crime. Public reaction was intense, with discussions about trust, pressure, and the consequences of unchecked fear. The apartment complex returned to normal life, but the memory of the freezer remained etched in the minds of residents. In the end, the case stood as a grim reminder of how ordinary lives can conceal extraordinary darkness. A series of choices, each meant to protect reputation and control outcomes, instead led to irreversible loss. What began as a hidden affair ended in exposure, arrest, and destruction. Behind closed doors, silence had allowed fear to grow, and fear had shaped a decision that changed every life involved forever.